good morning, good morning. Good morning, LinkedIn. It's Friday. Morning, Steve. How you doing?
Yes, yeah, not so bad. Yeah, it's
Good.
Friday.
Even though you thought we were live 10 minutes ago, which is normally
Yeah, I'm ready for this version.
this version. This is the real one. Anybody that has joined me on a LinkedIn live knows that when you come on, there's the little thing in the corner that says live is on from the minute you get in. And yeah, some people are thinking, oh, are we live? And they're like really careful about what they say.
Yeah, I should have
But
asked straight away. There you go.
no, it's fine. Steve, it's so good to join. It's almost we're so overdue a catch up. Like
Yeah,
I can't even tell you. So
yeah,
so I almost wish this was like a coffee catch up with
yeah,
nobody listening, because then we could really say, just
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
But we're on the hallowed platform that is LinkedIn, so we
yeah,
have to kind of keep it, whatever. But well, to a certain extent. So
yeah.
Steve, when was it that we first met? I was trying to work this out. Was it like maybe 2006,
Would
7
it,
or something?
yeah, would have been early 2000s, and I remember
Yeah.
the moment that you and I first had our interaction, and I bet you
Do
remember.
you?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about this morning, and I was hosting, sort of facilitating a finance conference. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And there's about
Yes.
40 or 50 odd people in the room. Do you remember this? Do you remember what I'm going to say?
Yeah, it's coming back to me now. You go ahead. You tell it.
And I got up to kind of position the day, and I went through the agenda and the purpose and the
Yeah.
context, and I was really, if you remember the context, it was a bit fraught at the time, I think, and I was so sort of mindful of kind of making sure that it landed in terms of the first 10 or 15 minutes, so people knew
Yeah.
why they were there.
Yeah.
And I finished and I said, has anyone got any questions? And your little hand came up. Do you remember this from the
No,
back?
I
And I went,
don't.
yes. And you went, I'm Cheryl. Who are you? Do you remember that? And I thought, oh my God, I've just spent the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes rambling on about the damn thing. I've never not even introduced myself. I was like, oh,
Oh my gosh.
remember that?
Oh, do you know, I don't remember that.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
remember that.
And
I
from
thought
there
you were
on,
going to go
we've
into,
been friends.
I thought you were going to go into the bit where our leader at the time said we were all rubbish, but that was like,
Yeah, that was one of the lowlights. The many lowlights of that particular day, I seem to
yeah,
remember, because it was a bit
yeah.
fraught. But yeah, I always remember that.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
and we did a
Oh,
quiz, didn't we? And you kind of your spirit and kind of interaction with it, shone within the room. Really, I remember us kind
oh,
of becoming friends almost immediately, and over a course
yeah,
did a
absolutely.
lot of good work
Yeah,
together. So
definitely. And and one of the reasons that we're talking now, so for those that don't know, I mean, Steve is just, I don't even know how to describe you, but obviously you've done global, learning and development, talent management training, all kinds of things. Background as an engineer, which
yeah,
is always a strange one, but it's probably a little bit like me with the background as an accountant, because
yeah,
once
yeah.
you're in the people space, and I remember you saying to me, "What are you doing in finance?"
On many occasions, I seem to remember. Yeah, your talents are
Yeah.
wasted in this area. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about once you move into that people space, anybody that's had the joy of working with Steve will just, and I was saying to Steve today, so I've got Steve's book here, which is Humanity Inc., which is amazing, and I'll sell it for him because he's too humble to do that, but it's an amazing book. And anybody that's worked with Steve, the things that Steve comes out with. So if you enjoy working with Steve, and if you've enjoyed the gems, you must get this book, because as I said to Steve, it's like listening to you. And why wouldn't it be? It's yeah, there's something about it. So yeah, so we first worked together back in those days, like, and then I sort of got you into it onto another couple of things that I was on,
So,
which again,
yeah.
whenever things are really difficult, whenever when I've been doing change and transformation, I often think of a lot of the things that you said, and I sort of think, who's the person that can come in and help with this really difficult challenge? Oh, I'll call Steve.
I'll take that as a compliment as well, Cheryl.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. How would you describe? Because obviously you're you're sort of doing your own thing now. We're going to get back to the book in a minute, but how would you describe what you do, what it is that you do when you go into organizations or work with individuals?
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good question. And when you ask me the question, I can almost see my wife and my daughters listening because they get asked what I do, and they're not able to kind of tell them either. I think
Yeah.
I want to. I suppose it's probably easier saying why I kind of do what I do rather than what I do. I think why I do what I do is because I believe fundamentally work needs to be better for humanity. I mean, I think the question you asked at the top here about is leadership for humanity, in my humble opinion, I think it is. I think it's without doubt that it is. How do I do that? Well, you know, I kind of look at two key levers. That's leadership and culture, and those two are kind of entwined, really. You know, the leadership of the organization dictates the kind of culture within it. And I think more often than not, I think when I wrote the book, and sometimes even now when I read through the book, it's a bit of a rage. There is a bit of frustration about, oh my word, you know, this is, if you were reading this and kind of going, this is what work is, you'd be wanting to change it. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, you know, it's without doubt the you know, we've got higher levels of absenteeism and sickness and mental health issues now than ever previously reported. You know, we've had the great resignation around COVID, and then now we've got quiet quitting, which isn't really a surprise, is it? Because the people that are left to do the work are just deciding to actually just do what's the minimum requirements for their own sanity. And those that, you know, feel compelled to go above and beyond are probably doing far too much and feeling ill and stressed and fatigued as a result of it. And we're kind of watching this happen. We're not doing anything about it. Or it seems like we're not doing anything about it. So that's in a long kind of response to the question. That's why I exist, really. And that's really, you know, you and I have known each other many years. I think deep down that's probably what I've always wanted to do when I've worked with teams and organizations. So just make it better, you know. So.
Yeah, and I would almost call you, you know, I know you've done like exec coaching, whatever, with individuals, and I'd be interested actually to understand which you prefer, whether it's working with individuals, like individual leaders and execs, or working with teams. Because obviously, and I've seen you, I guess, do both, where you come in and maybe facilitate for either, I guess, a team that's dysfunctional, or which aren't a lot of them, or a team that is maybe struggling to go through change or something. I wonder, have you got a preference? What do you prefer?
Recently, I suppose if I'm being totally transparent, I think recently teams is probably more. I enjoy both. I certainly do enjoy both, but I think sometimes it feels more fulfilling when you work with teams. I think sometimes with individuals, you don't necessarily always feel like you're having the right level of impact and it's being useful and valuable for that individual. Whereas with teams, you do tend to get more sort of it's more transactional. There's a level of feedback there if the team is working better, you know, as a result of that, fixing things and that kind of thing. So I think teams maybe just slightly more, but I enjoy both, really.
Yeah. And let's in terms of the book, it's interesting when you said you know, when you use the term rage, actually, because I read it and I was like, Steve's angry, man. Like Steve is like
oh no.
So I could almost see you. I could literally almost see you saying it. Because but there is an element of, you know, in terms of the why and the rationale for writing it. And I know it's been coming a while, but you're right in terms of like things are pretty bad. Like, you know, things were pretty bad and they still are pretty bad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I was reading the other day, there was 63,000 employees up until June last year in the UK were paid below the minimum wage, right? 63,000. There's over 200 organizations. I couldn't find the figures for the whole year, but that was just the first half of the year. Over 200 organizations have decided to do that, you know, and pay them below the minimum wage. Now, I know business is difficult. Do you know what I mean? And I've been a leader and I've worked with senior, you know, chief execs and senior leaders, and I know it's difficult. But I guess the question is, where's the where's the sort of moral compass in that? Leadership is a moral discipline ultimately, and where's the moral compass gone if we think that that's okay to do that legally, to break the law, you know, and to give them some money rather than what's expected legally? I think you know, and we've become accustomed to the fact that, you know, organizations can break the law. It's kind of, you know, every year, every week, almost every day you can listen. You know, I've read some of the broadsheets, and you know, you don't have to look too hard to find instances where they've, you know, flagrantly gone out and broken the law, and it's okay, they'll take the fine as long as they can, you know, it sort of weighs out against the profits. So I think it's, you know, we've got into this space where it's not healthy. It's not, you know, it's not healthy for the GDP now, because we're finding people are not, you know, not wanting to engage in work. Almost a pandemic today is apathy, isn't it? You know, lack of enthusiasm and sort of commitment and loyalty towards an organization, and that's actually costing. When you look at it, there's lots of linkages here around, you know, the cost to the GDP of a country, as well as the profits to an organization and the well-being of an individual. You know, and I think what I've tried to do within the book is to say, look, this isn't, you know, this isn't everyone. So, but this is a higher percentage now than it's ever been, and it just seems to be the norm that we're okay with this. And what I've tried to sort of say in the book is that, you know, the purpose of work is to do three things: is to do great, because they have to be able to do business. You've got to be profitable. I get that, but it's also to do good and to be well as well. So do good is about the whole, you know, the interaction with the societies and the communities in which it works, and also to be well is to be conscious of the fact of the culture that you're creating. Because actually, if you do all those three things, a lot of the human needs from work come out. You know, you create high levels of meaning and autonomy and growth and belonging and connection. The things that we know that we need as humans to actually be engaged around life more generally. So
do you think I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, do you think there's a generational difference, and have you seen this at all? So do you think that, and I guess maybe this is my Pollyanna like being hopeful, but do you think that old school of, you know, sort of very dictatorial, disempowering, albeit I know, and in your book you talk about, you know, managers and, you know, leaders that you had years and years ago that clearly got it, you know, whatever that means. But do you think that there is a generational difference in terms of, like, you know, our generation of the Gen Xers and you know, and the boomers or whatever are still stuck in that very old mindset of, you know, profit above everything and treat people however just to get the job done? Do you see that changing? And you know, and you've got two daughters who I think I'm going to say are in their 20s, similar to like my daughter's in their 20s. So do you see a difference, and do you think that things are changing, that the new generation are going to be a lot more, you know, kind of like, you know, well-being, more well-rounded, meaning, purpose, etc.? What's your view?
I think they definitely will be, and I think but the problem is they're not in those positions of influence at this moment in time. And how do they get there? That's the thing. How do we enable them to get there? Because, you know, for as long as the X's and the boomers hang around, those channels may well be blocked. You know, I told somebody the other day a funny story of my daughter who was on an interview with a company that she wanted to work for, and I came in lunchtime and made myself a coffee, and I was listening to her do the interview. As a proud dad, she was asking all the right questions and listening, and you know, and all that. And she came off the phone and she said, I said to her, "How did the interview go?" "Yeah, it went really well." She said, "But they, you know, they want me in 2 or 3 days a week. You know, I'm not sure whether that's for me." Now, this is an organisation that's not that far away, but on her terms, she doesn't want to do that at the moment in time. Now, we can get into a lot of debate as to whether virtual working is healthy. I have a feeling that it's not, and I think, you know, we don't, in business, what we tend to do is we cut ties with the past and we say this is the new normal. Do you remember that kind of phrase, which really irritated me? And we had Google and Zoom go, right, nobody's ever going to go back to an office, and then, you know, about a year later they went, hang on a second, they suddenly realized creation and innovation and collaboration and all those things that kind of make the organization great is not through virtual mediums. It's through the informal chats and everything else. So I think in answer to the question, they will make a difference. If you remember, we did a study, and this is kudos to Danny. You remember Danny Hown and the strategy group at NPower? We did a study. Remember that work with Ian and Alyssa and Sonia, I think, involved in it. And we came up with the conclusion that, and the question was, the hypothesis was, will we have to change work on the basis of the generations that are coming through into work at this time? And our conclusion was, we think we ought to, right, in terms of the way that we work, virtual working and that kind of thing. But the conclusions of the exec team at the time was, actually, I think the new generations that are going to come into work are not going to change it. They're going to have to adapt to it, right? So but what we didn't,
we were ahead of our time.
Well, we were in that respect, certainly in terms of that work. But what we didn't foresee was the proliferation of social media, because social media really has kind of started to kind of up the game in terms of what work needs to be like. It's had a massive
influence.
You know, our daughter's generation around what they expect of work. So I think over time it will be. I mean, I actually said to somebody the other day, if in the years that I've got left to work, I want to have the biggest impact on leadership, I wouldn't necessarily go into organizations. I'd go into schools. That's where I'd go, you know, because that's where it needs to really work, you know, for the next generation.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. And that's, you know, that's just got me thinking about all sorts of things that, you know, we'll do on or off air. But let's talk about the impact of the pandemic. Let's talk about virtual working, actually, because there is it has brought about a fundamental shift, particularly for organizations that weren't doing it before. I mean, I guess from our perspective, certainly in terms of my perspective, and I'm guessing we were probably fortunate enough to be working for organizations that were relatively progressive in terms of probably were doing some remote working before the pandemic anyway.
Sure.
You know, these organizations that have suddenly discovered Zoom in the pandemic, I'm like, what? What? Like, that's just
exactly.
But let's talk about because I've got a theory about this remote, about the need to go in beyond. So you mentioned creation, innovation, collaboration. Let's talk. Let me get your thoughts on remote working and what's good about it and what's not so good about it, from in terms of human need perspective, because I think it's important.
It's a good point. A good question. I mean, I think the way I look at it is we've been fortunate enough to work for organizations where you know, we've worked there for a longer period of time. There's been a sort of an expectation that you don't come in and do 2 years and then go off and do something else, you know, somewhere else, which is the norm now, which is not a bad thing necessarily. But we've worked in organizations where we've had a chance to grow a social network, you know, of people that we've known. You and I are a really good example of this. You know, we've known each other well over 20 odd years, you know, and that relationship has, you know, at times given us real value in terms of, you know, sharing ideas and thoughts and that kind of thing. I'm concerned that what with AI, virtual working, social media, and probably numerous other things, we're becoming more fragmented. As a human race, we are designed to work together. It's the only opportunity that we've got to kind of really understand the world in which we live and the challenges that we have. And fragmentation is not going to you know, help us in the future. In fact, it could be quite damaging. And I'm concerned. And I think work has a massive part to play in that. So am I a fan of virtual working? Probably deep down, no. Am I a fan of choice? Yes. I think people should have choice around where they work and how they work. But I think there's something, I think that the pearl in this is, how do organizations create an environment where people want to come to work together? And when I mean together, that's physically together. Do you know what I mean? Around the table, looking at each other in the eye, building the relationships. You can't do it by proxy, I don't think. I always remember just a quick short side story, but it kind of still resonates with me now. And it was with the work with NPower. We Alyssa and I went to BT headquarters, which was then in Buckinghamshire somewhere, and they hired they had somebody on the payroll who was a rocket scientist or an astrophysicist or something like that, and his job was to look into the future. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I
I can't remember
do.
the guy's,
Futurist. Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember the guy's name now, but it was compelling. We sat there for an hour, a
Mm,
couple of hours one morning, and we listened to him
yeah.
talk about the future of work. And I asked him the question, and I said, "Would virtual reality ever replace human contact?" And he looked me in the eye and he said, "No." He said, "Because psychologically, your your intent to get up in the morning, wash and
Mm,
shave, get dressed, and drive 2.5 hours to come here deepens our relationship. You can't build that emotional connection through virtual channels." And it kind of, I think that's still true today. I don't know whether whether there's research out there to contradict that, but I think we're missing something. I'm not saying that
yeah.
we should go back to work 9 to 5, 5 days a week, but
Yeah.
we should find ways in which we can work together, because
Yeah.
we're born to connect as humans, So
Yeah. I it's that's really interesting. I'm kind of on the fence at the moment,
mm,
or I'm trying to figure out what I think it looks like. Only because, and you talked about it before, for example, social media and
mm,
what that's done, and also the pandemic. So I know somebody. I'm not going to mention her on here, but we connected during. We were involved in a workshop. We were both teaching different parts of it. She's in the US. If she's listening to this, she'll figure out who she is. She's in the
yeah,
US, but basically, she met her now husband online during the
yeah,
pandemic, moved to the US to marry him.
yeah,
There is something about and I think we see it in the younger generation. There is something about, you think about online dating
yeah, yeah, yeah,
versus what
yeah,
was, you go to a
yeah.
club or a bar or whatever at the weekend. There is definitely something about some people are able to connect. But I don't know. I'm just wondering: is humanity changing such that
Yeah.
people
If you'd have said,
can connect in different ways?
yeah, if you'd have said to me that she didn't go and meet him and then married him, then I'd go, "Wow, that is a really impressive
Yeah,
kind of But the fact of, I mean, you can create. I think you can create relationships via virtual. I think that
yeah,
the challenge comes when you have problems and challenges or deeper relationships that you want to
yeah, yeah.
create. I don't think that can be done virtually. I just don't. I don't know. I like you. I'm
It's
trying to sort it out, but I
yeah.
think there are limits. You know.
It's interesting. Let me bring up Rasha's
Yeah.
comment here. She says, amazing topic. Thinking about it for a long time, qualities such as integrity, empathy, accountability, and a commitment to serving the greater good. When leaders fail to embody these qualities or prioritize self interest over the welfare of others, it can result in detrimental consequences for
Yeah.
society.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rasha. Because actually,
Yeah.
that bit, I think the bit as well that you pulled out there, the self interest, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once a leader moves from, and it's Simon Sinek or Sinek
Yeah.
talks about this, doesn't he? In, like, leaders eat last. Once leaders move out of serving to
Yeah. Yeah.
self-service,
Yeah.
that you know that
Yeah.
that
Big
kind of
time.
is detrimental, isn't it, for anybody
Yeah.
that that they're supporting. But
Yeah.
yeah, the virtual thing is interesting, I think, and I guess we'll see how it pans out. I think particularly generationally, again, as to whether the generation that's now, what the digital natives, I want to say that they're
Mm.
called,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
almost have grown up surgically attached to an iPad, whether it's frightening, isn't it?
I
Sometimes
know.
watching it,
Yeah.
whether actually that causes some rewiring in the brain almost,
It
you
probably
know?
will be. Yeah, it probably is at this moment in time, and yeah, like you said, the next generation or future
Yeah,
generations will have less reliance on relational.
yeah,
I think
mm,
we've got to where we are as humans because of the relationships we've
yeah,
had, and I think social
yeah,
media
yeah,
and others, virtual working, living at work or working
yeah,
at home,
yeah,
serve to fragment it. I think
yeah,
if you look in restaurants and you see two people out for dinner and they're on their phones, they're not connected, are
no,
they? Really, in
no,
the
I
true
know,
sense of the word, So,
no. Let's talk about the well-being bit, because I
mm,
feel like, and you sort of mentioned that, and I feel that, whether or not it's connected to the in person, because I do have a theory about, you know, I think there's definitely something about socially connecting physically with somebody, but also whether or not that comes from work or other people is the thing. But for me, there's a well-being thing around just the demands that are being placed on individuals. Currently, it probably links to what Rasha was saying as well. What are your thoughts about that, and how there was a post on LinkedIn this morning about quite a high-profile female in the UK lawyer, really sort of tragic story, and we literally just keep seeing them, it seems like every week. What should leaders be doing, and how can leaders get that message of this importance of well-being, and actually their responsibility and the accountability on them as leaders in terms of well-being?
Yeah, I mean, this is a real kind of topic of interest for me, because I think we have expected, I think if we're being really honest, we have expected employees to become more resilient, as a result of the pressures that we put on them. And if you were to, I mean, the way I found myself talking to a group of leaders just before the end of the year, and I kind of said to them, if you had a job opportunity to go and work for an organisation where they said that they would develop and strengthen your resilience, would you go for that job? Would that be a job of interest for you? Because typically, humans don't want to be put into that kind of situation where more is expected of them, and it's looked upon badly if they don't rise to the challenge, right? It's just, to me, it seems unfair. That's not what leadership is about. My definition is, you're a leader if you have the care of others as a priority in your life. So that sort of broadens it out for me. It's not just about being a manager or a leader, it's about being a teacher or a parent, or in some aspects of your life you are probably a leader. And if you're not thinking about the care of others, then you're not leading, as far as I'm concerned. And when we've kind of, I think we've tipped the sort of scales in terms of actually being unfair to employees in this regard. We've created impossible jobs, jobs where you do more for less, smarter not harder, less resource. Any leader that sees any of their people doing that needs to be fighting the good cause to get to get it evened out, I think. And we what we do is we promote those people because they're good and the most resilient people, and that only serves to increase the culture of being more resilient, and those that are really talented, probably people that are really good at certain things, but you give them too much, and they cease to function, are left by the wayside, and they're people that we should be looking after and should be bringing into the fold, and making sure that we create an environment where people can do their best work. I think it's down on the leader to create the culture rather than the expectation that people become more resilient.
It's interesting, because the one thing that you say in the book is that you didn't go into capitalism, right? But I almost feel like we can't talk about this topic without linking it to capitalism, because when I think about even films, like Wall Street, and Hollywood paints a picture of business, right? And I said Wall Street. I wasn't actually thinking of the Wolf of Wall Street, but if we had long enough, we'd go into that.
The modern day equivalent.
But Hollywood paints a picture of business, even in the film, Sleepless in Seattle, where he's like, it's not personal, it's business. And you almost feel that as leaders sometimes, actually, and I even think about it, some of those hard decisions sometimes, like, for example, redundancies and things like that, and it's not necessarily therefore that those decisions don't need to be taken, but sometimes even in the way that they're done, the way that people are treated, we sort of fall back onto businesses, you have to make these tough decisions, you have to sometimes be ruthless, you have to do, and it's a crappy narrative, really, that we've sort of do you know what I mean, that we've normalized as this is how business is done, and it surely doesn't have to be that way, right?
No, absolutely no. And it's a narrative that gives license to that kind of behavior as well, doesn't it? you know, you can be ruthless and exploit people. But
yeah,
the thing is, I think if you think about business as you know, if we were to reinvent it now, what would we do to it? I think
yeah,
if we are, you know, all the biases and prejudices we have and everything else come from fragmentation and from a lack of awareness around the world
yeah,
in which we live. And businesses, in some respects, kind of, you know, if they're not careful, they become sort of a cultural norm of one particular bias or a couple of biases
yeah,
that kind of are predicted through the culture in which it
yeah,
operates. And I think one of the things that, you know, businesses can do, and I saw this work really well at Sage. Sage offered employees 5 days a year to do work with a cause or a charity that was close to their heart. And
yeah,
what it did was it got, and even leadership development as well. I've seen models around leadership development where you take leaders out of their normal environment and put them into a very different environment with different people. People they wouldn't necessarily speak to or go out of their way to kind of interact with at any point in time. And the minute you do that, they get a different perception around the world.
yeah,
And I think work has become global, and
yeah,
it, you know, truly global now, to where it was 10 years ago. And
yeah,
yet organizations are still, you know, predominantly one type or two types
yeah,
of kind of you know, character. You know,
yeah.
it's not diverse in any way, shape or form.
No,
So
no, it's very
work can tackle that problem if it
yeah,
looked at it differently. And it could be good for
yeah,
the organization and good for the people who work for it as well.
absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
gonna just mention a couple of comments here. I've had to go into my phone just to see who the user is because it doesn't always come. So Sebastian, hi Sebastian, how are you doing? He's got here. I like this quote: "Leaders develop leaders, not followers." 94% of millennials want their skills to be used for a cause. A Gallup survey reveals that only 13% of employees are committed. I think AI is a great chance to
Yeah.
get the mundane tasks done and empower employees by engaging them in a real cause, a real problem solving, eliminating hierarchy, which kills intimacy.
Yeah.
Employees don't want to work 9 to 5, entering data in a system and going home.
Yeah.
Leadership has drastically shifted from autocratic, task driven to democratic, people driven.
Yeah.
Sebastian, it sounds like you've been reading Steve's book. And then, and also from Sylvia, trauma informed leadership would change the
Yeah.
world. Sylvia, do you know what, Sylvia Anna? Do you know what? As somebody that's spent a bit of time in the NHS, working on a board looking at trauma informed
Right. Okay.
care, I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. Trauma
Yeah.
informed leadership is just like
Yeah.
it would be a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you couldn't,
so much
you
to
know,
say.
I think there's in the end of the book, I try because because Giles, my kind of conscience in terms of putting the book together, you know, and Charisse, actually my much better half, was kind of saying you've got to conclude it with a sort of call to action. And it got me thinking around, well, you know, anyone can become a leader, but not
Yeah,
everyone can lead. So what could we do to ensure that, certainly from a business perspective, you know, you had leaders that at a bare minimum do no harm, you know, whether that be to people or environment,
yeah,
and we actually have a license, almost a license to lead. And if you're
yeah,
found to be guilty of any discrepancies on a people front,
yeah,
or your mental well-being or stress or fatigue issues went through the roof, then you could be struck off or given some level of support to be able to
yeah,
help. Because it's not easy being a leader either. I mean, you know, we can point the finger and sort of say that, well, you know, all of our problems come down to leadership, but
yeah,
actually leadership is a really difficult job in today's world, and we're not necessarily
yeah,
equipped to do it. We've actually developed the leaders to almost operate very left brain. I know the dimensions of the brain are being
yeah,
challenged by Ian Gilchrist's work, but you know, they've got to be strategic, analytical,
yeah,
objective, all those kind of things. And we've put in the seed, or they've got to be empathetic as well. But
yeah.
it's
Just as
almost
an
like,
add-on.
yeah, it's an add-on. Yeah, it's additional. This takes you, you know, to different space. But I haven't got time for that kind of stuff. I'm sort of doing the strategic and I think the question about what can leaders do, I think they need to do and view. A good friend of mine, Andy Vass, and I talked a lot about this and came up with this phrase around doing and viewing. We are busy fools at this moment in time in business. Really, we're too busy doing the doing and not necessarily looking at the impact that we're having, I think, as leaders. Yeah, I mentioned the wonderful lyrics of the Beatles song around day after day, alone on a hill, a fool with a foolish grin is keeping perfectly still. But the book actually invites the question, who's the fool? Is it the person who's standing or sitting, looking and observing, or is it the person who's going around in the next verse talking loads of things but not being heard? We've got to get a balance between actually doing and viewing. And you've got to, I think it's too easy to, I often ask leaders in organizations, what percentage of the problems you face today are based on decisions you made yesterday? That's quite a revealing question to ask, because a lot of, if people were quite really honest about it, a lot of the problems they face today are based on decisions that they actually made not that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just purely on the basis of reaction. So slow things down would be my call for leaders, because to slow things down, you actually go further and faster potentially as well. Counterintuitive, but I think leaders are caught in this treadmill at this moment in time as well.
Yeah, it's like and the reason I mentioned capitalism was why it's just this, it's the system, like the system is has trapped us in these, like a model of behaviors and ways of treating other people and all of that, and definitions of success and everything that are not healthy really. And I think almost as well, and Sylvia Anna's put here, self-leadership is a foundational pillar of great leadership. Which I think is so true. But there's something, and you probably see this actually. A lot of leaders, they get to the top of organisations, or they get towards, sort of like later stages in their career, and you do wonder how many sort of like look back and think, what have I achieved? What was it all for? What was the purpose? What was the meaning? And I think some of that is because of the model is just so broken. It's so one-dimensional. It's so profit and growth focused generally, unless it's a B Corp or an organisation that is truly balanced. It's quite it's a strange system.
Yeah, we need to encourage more organisations to work more broadly about what they do in the work context. It's always been a jar for me when people say the purpose of work is to create wealth and profit. Actually, that's that's quite narrow, really, and I don't think it serves us as humanity in the 21st century. I mean, you only have to look at the first 24 years of this century and where we've got to. It's not working. We need a different way of looking at it, and I think we need a wider conversation with government officials as well as business owners and CEOs and everything else to kind of look at how can governments encourage businesses to do more outside of the normal context of work. I think work is going to change dramatically with AI. Nobody really knows what the impact of AI is going to have, but it's we didn't know what the internet was going to have, did we, years ago? And I can still remember somebody ordering a book and then saying, "Oh, I've got on the internet," which in those days was AOL, I think it was, or something like that. They said, there's this company in Chicago that reckons that they can get this leadership book to me by tomorrow, and we're in Reading, I'm a management trainer. And the following day he ordered it, and the following day at 11 o'clock, package for Mr. Whiting. That was Amazon, so it radically changes the way that we're going to be thinking and interacting with the world, and AI is definitely going to do that. So
absolutely right. It's been, and anybody that wants to know more about what's in Steve's brain, the book Humanity Inc. And and there is something about I if I was to leave one thing with individuals, it would be humanity, as in like looking for the humanity in others. So if you are a leader and you're listening to this, looking for and caring for the humanity, and not just seeing people as resources, right? Focusing on the human bit, and kind of connecting with people. What final tips would you leave individuals that are listening to this, and also where can people find you and connect with you?
They can find me on I need my daughter here to remind me where I am, so I'm on LinkedIn obviously, and Amazon, Instagram and Twitter as well. The Humanity Club on Instagram. We'd love more followers on that. So that's a bit more personal, kind of I share a little bit more about what I'm seeing and that kind of thing. It's a bit more personal on Instagram.
What was that called? The Humanity Club?
The Humanity Club.
Okay,
Full stop. Humanity Club. Yeah. I mean, I think I mean it would be different for the demographics. I'm getting a sense that, you know, mainly the people that are listening to us, and thank you for listening as well. I think if they're the sort of 20s to 30s, is to, I think what you said earlier on is actually quite really poignant. You know, one of our biggest needs as humans is this essence of meaning, right? So, you know, why do I get up in the morning? And I think there is nothing so sad as somebody who, you know, ends up punching the snooze button because they don't want to get out of bed and they don't want to go to work and have that Sunday evening feeling of the dread of Monday and the 5 days that follow. You know, don't live in that world would be my call. And, you know, if you need to create an organization that better suits your needs and your value that you can bring to the world. I think I never thought of myself as and I'm sure you didn't either when we were younger, you know, as people who own their own businesses and, you know, add value to the world of commerce and everything else. But it's easy to do. It's not difficult to do, and you should have self-belief and confidence to be able to do it, because we need more people who you know, see work differently and kind of work on their own terms around earning a living.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, we've got to wrap it up because we've gone over, and we've got one more comment, but it goes into a question. So I think it's Sebastian's question. So we're going to answer it in the comments after we're done, because we've gone slightly over. But thank you all for listening. If you're listening live, in particular, thank you. And if you're listening on the replay, please do go and check out Steve's work and check out the book. But yeah, Steve, it's been great. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Take care.